Joining us now is Frank Zaccanelli.
Frank Zaccanelli.
Frank Zaccanelli.
Frank Zaccanelli.
Let's welcome Frank Zaccanelli.
Live from the Real News Studios in Dallas, Texas, welcome to the To Be Frank Show. Your host, Frank Zaccanelli, has been in the world of domestic and international business and professional sports for 40 years. And as a former minority owner, president, and general manager of the Dallas Mavericks, he's been asked to comment on current events in the national news for most of his professional career. But what he and many others are really looking for is a place to find just the facts. Welcome to the To Be Frank Show.
Live from Dallas, Texas, welcome to the To Be Frank Show, Thursday's edition. I'm your host, Frank Zaccanelli. I'm happy to be with you as always. And we're excited again about the show. No guest today, too much news. Literally, it doesn't make sense to put a guest on when you have got this much information in the news. And I sit there and I really struggle with, all right, how do I do all this? But clearly, the segments that we're going to hit, the information we're going to hit, are really important matters as it relates to where we stand in the United States of America, in the world, and what's going on. So we're going to have a real exciting show for you. And for those of you where this is one of your first shows, we're on show 20-something, and you can catch all the To Be Frank shows that have already been taped and have already been played on the tobefrankshow.com. I know they're all there, but you can find these shows because our show is being carried on the To Be Frank Show LinkedIn, the To Be Frank Show YouTube, the To Be Frank Show Twitter, and the To Be Frank Show Facebook, as well as the tobefrankshow.com. So please go back and look at some of the older episodes, and they're kind of fun to watch, and that's the beauty of podcasting. If I was on one of the television networks, you'd have to be sitting in front of the TV at the right time or you'd miss it. Here, the beauty of podcasting is you can pull it up at any time, anywhere. So that's the great stuff. All right, we're happy to be here, so let's get to the pre-monologue. Okay. Our first segment in the pre-monologue is about one of my favorite people to pick on, Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida. He's real easy to pick on. I mean, I don't have anything personally against this man, but he's really easy to pick on because he says some incredibly, in my opinion, dumb things, okay? He just comes out with stuff, and I'm trying to figure out, like, Governor, what are you doing? Is somebody telling you to say this? He compares the opening of the schools in Florida to the SEAL raid and killing Osama bin Laden. Now, I cannot make this up. Let me repeat. He compares the opening of the schools with the SEAL raid that killed Osama bin Laden. And he goes on and he basically says that, the schools are in a mode where they really have to take care of their kids, and they have to plan properly, and they have to execute properly. All the stuff that is very obvious. I mean, you're telling us something that we already understand. And most of the schools, to be honest with you, are not doing exactly what Governor DeSantis has set out to say about this. But the planning and the execution, and he compares it. Now, he was in the Navy, I believe, but he compares this to a SEAL team going in and killing the number one terrorist in the world. And I'm just completely confused about this, all right? Now, this has been printed. I mean, I've been on Governor DeSantis for a long time because he has a tendency to really talk a little bit too much, and sometimes when he gets into certain things, it almost like when he's giving a speech, he gets lost in the middle of the speech. And, I really don't understand how you would ever make a relationship between the opening of the schools and the SEAL team killing Osama bin Laden. Here's his quote. Just as the SEALs just as the SEALs faced obstacles to bring bin Laden to justice, so too is Martin County School District finding a way to provide parents and their students a meaningful choice as an instructor and the ability to continue to learn on distance learning. This is his quote on what he said. And it doesn't even make sense when I read it. It's even hard to read, okay? But he's trying to now use an analogy that they're facing obstacles and the SEAL team faces obstacles. I got news for you, Governor. The SEAL team has nothing to do with trying to keep our children safe. Either you're going to go in with a plan to keep the schools sanitized, you're going to handle the social distancing, you're going to handle everything that needs to be handled in terms of masks. Now, you've got all kinds of issues that are out there now with teachers and strikes, some other things that we're going to talk a little bit about. But when it comes to the execution, okay, I've got firsthand knowledge that says that most of the school districts during the summer didn't really even know how they were going to approach this, okay? So I just think it's a little bit odd that when we're talking about our children and we're talking about the safety of our children in the schools, that anybody of the magnitude of a governor of Florida would use an analogy of the SEAL teams that killed Osama bin Laden in a raid. I mean, I just don't know how any of that ties up. Okay. The NFL said today that 68 players have opted out so far of the NFL season with COVID-19 concerns. Now, I'm going to go through a few of the players. It is not your top-notch players. These are not going to be household names, which makes me think, is there something else here? Are they trying now to get paid a certain amount, not have to play? I mean, there may be other things that are embedded into this NFL story that came out. But I'm going to tell you what I really think the story is in a minute, because I think there's a real underlying story here. And I think that story is going to turn out to be not so good. But I'll give you just a few of the names. Not a lot of big names, but Devin Funchess from the Packers. He's a wide receiver, pretty good player. Geronimo Allison of the Lions played with the Packers. Again, for people that are in fantasy football, everyone understands who these players are. If you're not really tied to fantasy football and maybe not even an NFL fan, this is really more about that sports is really caught up in this whole coronavirus mess. It's just caught up in it, and there's no two ways about it, and they're just trying to deal with it. But you got a list of players, 68, that have decided not to play. Again, I really need to dig deeper because there may be underlying issues why some of these guys are not playing that may not have to do directly with the coronavirus. Because, there's something just not right about this story. Alan Hearns of the Dolphins, another wide receiver, pretty good player. Played at Jacksonville, pretty good player. Marquise Lee of the Patriots, all right? And then Marquise Goodwin of the Eagles. Now, these guys, I picked these guys because a lot of people will know these guys, again, because of fantasy football, if you're not a football fan, because they're either running backs or they're wide receivers. You have a ton of offensive linemen. You got defensive linemen. You got everybody that basically is out there that 68 people decided not to play. But there's a bigger problem. And here's the issue that I think we're going to see and we're going to face in football. I thought that last year there was an inordinate amount of injuries. And the reason that I thought that is it seemed like I watched a reasonable amount of football. And I thought that as you're watching the games, it seems like, every 5 minutes they're carrying someone else off the field or someone else is limping off the field. And the game has become incredibly fast, incredibly violent. There's a big difference from, the 60s and 70s and even the 80s. You had big, strong guys, but they didn't get to this point that the athletes are at today because of technology and everything else that they've now learned about the human body. You've got guys now that are 6'4", 250 pounds that are running as fast or faster than wide receivers ran back in the 70s and 80s. And these guys are bigger, they're stronger, and I just think when you really take a look at it, there's not really an easy solution to all of the injury problems. Now, we're not even getting into the CTE thing and all the head concussions and all that stuff. We're literally talking about your basic injury. Well, let me tell you what's going to happen here, and I'll make the prediction, and it's as simple as anything I've ever said on the show. You haven't had the proper build-up to the season. There have been no preseason games, okay? And the training camps have been pretty mild because they really don't want to cause a breakout in coronavirus, because as soon as they do, they're going to have to shut down their camp. And then all of a sudden it affects the whole league. This isn't going to be like baseball. You know, baseball every so often now, probably a couple times a week, a team comes down with a breakout and then they cancel the games for, that week. And then the rest of the teams play and they kind of go on. In the NFL, that's not going to work. But I think the bigger issue to COVID-19 is the issue as it relates to the injury problem. These guys are not ready to play at the level they're going to have to play because they haven't had the 6 months of preparation like they do every year in order to do this. So what does that tell me? It tells me it's obvious that there are going to be more injuries because people are not ready. Because once you get out there and you see your opponent across the line, you're going to go all out. I mean, it's the only way that you know how to do. And I think because of the lack of preparation, you're going to have some gigantic issues. So we're going to follow this story. But my prediction is the NFL is going to have a really hard time keeping players healthy on the field. I think you're going to see a world record set of injuries this year. Now, again, if they have breakouts with COVID-19, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I mean, you got some owners that are saying, we got an 80,000 person stadium and we're going to put 15,000 in the stadium. Does that make sense? I don't know. I don't think it really makes a hell of a lot of difference. The crowd's not going to be a normal crowd. I mean, you watch the NBA, they figured out in this bubble that they're playing in, and hockey has done the same thing, the announcers and some of the artistic things that they're doing. I mean, it's working out okay. I don't think you have to have fans in order to have a competitive game. I think in order to have a competitive game, you got to have athletes that are ready to compete. And I think that bigger than the COVID scenario in the NFL, because of the violence of the game, there's going to be issues as it relates to injuries. So we'll see kind of how that one works. Okay. The third segment of the pre-monologue is, this one's really a bad story, okay? I know that people have been following the situation with all these police chiefs that have been stepping down. I live in a city here in Dallas where the police chief announced, and she's a female, African-American female, she stepped down a couple days ago, I think it was, and just said, she's going to move on. Now, some of that may be related to non-Black Lives Matter, non-protesting, non-other things. That may be a situation where it's just a parting of the ways for both sides. But this situation in Rochester, New York, is no parting of the ways. The police chief and his lieutenant, and I think there might even be 2 lieutenants, have now stepped down. And I'm going to read some of this to you, and it's really bad. Now, upstate New York, which I'm pretty familiar with, Rochester, New York, is a really nice little community up in upstate New York. It's pretty quiet. I mean, there's not a lot that goes on there. They got some colleges there. It sits right on the lake. It's a pretty nice place, right? But now, because of this whole situation in our country, there was an African-American man who clearly had mental health issues that was found, and I guess they got a call, and he was found in the street. He was completely naked, and he was kind of spitting. So what they did is they took a hood, if you watch the video, and they put it over his head because they didn't want to be spit on. I mean, there was just a lot of issues. And here is a guy, you know, in a lot of ways you got to feel for, you know, these mental health issues in our country. There's no way that you can't have compassion for some of this. But the fact of the matter is, you know, he was clearly mentally ill. You know, he's in the street naked. And the cops tried to do the best that they could. Well, this gentleman died. And there's a big, big controversy now. There are all kinds of riots going on now in Rochester, which is a medium to small size city. These are not big cities up there. Syracuse, Rochester, Albany, it's the capital. You know, these aren't gigantic cities. These aren't top 50 cities, okay? But now in Rochester, you've got so many protests that are going on, and you've got so much violence that's occurring. This is not a George Floyd issue. It just isn't. And if you watch this show, you know how sensitive I am to the whole George Floyd issue. And I'm also very, very concerned about the situation in Kenosha, Wisconsin, okay? That situation there, we've got to see what comes out of there, all right? We've got to see how all that washes out. So we've taken a really firm stance on this show that the police have to stay in line. We've also taken a very firm stance that the police are very necessary. But in Rochester, New York, you got another situation. And this chief, African American, 22 years on the force, just said, you know, I've had enough. I'm not going to let my integrity and my character be challenged by the people that are trying to challenge it. So let me read a little bit of this. His name, the gentleman that died is Daniel Pride, I believe. I think it's Daniel Pride or Daniel Prude. But anyways, he was mentally ill. You know, we should help our mentally ill that are on the street. But unfortunately, this man died in police custody because of what I told you. Now, here's a quote from Ron Singletary, who is the chief of police in Rochester. Here's a quote. African-American guy on the job for a long time. The events over the past week are an attempt to destroy my character and my integrity. It's an attempt to destroy my character and my integrity. Now, that's not how we should be operating here. I mean, this chief of police, African American, has taken an incredibly hard stance that, look, we followed this thing by the book. We can't have a guy who's mentally ill spitting on us, so we put a hood on him. And you see the video. You know, they're not trying to rough him up. They didn't shoot him. They didn't do any of this stuff. I mean, this is a very ill human being that is sad because he's on the street, he's naked, he's the whole deal, okay? But Chief Singletary just wasn't going to have any more of this. He's got 22 years of service in the city of Rochester, okay? So this isn't some guy that just showed up there. This guy's obviously part of the community, but he just said enough's enough. Now, Rochester's mayor, can't make this up. Her name is Lovely Warren. Lovely Warren. Okay? Now, if Miss Warren was white, black, green, brown, I would take the same approach that I'm taking. Lovely Warren. That's her name. Okay? She happens to be African American. Lovely questioned the motives of Chief Singleton and his leadership. And when the officers found Mr. Prude, it's not Pride, Mr. Prude, naked in the street, the mental health authorities issued a statement that he was mentally ill, and the family has even come in and mentioned about his mental illness, okay? Again, we can't put all of these in the same box. They just don't fit in the same compartment. I mean, everything that happened with George Floyd, okay, that's a completely different scenario than what we're dealing with here. This is a situation that we have another liberal mayor, okay, and a governor who I can't even believe that Mario Cuomo's son is this bad. Andrew Cuomo, who's got the biggest mess in the world now with Billy D. de Blasio, the worst mayor in the history of world existence, okay? The worst mayor in the history of world existence. Lovely Warren, okay, is tied now for second place with the Summer of Love Seattle, Teddy Wheeler, who we're going to get to, and now lovely Warren in Rochester, okay? This is all I have to say, is that what are we trying to accomplish here? You know, all she wants to do as the mayor is, you know, follow the herd, follow the crowd, lead the crowd, if you will. Well, so how's that done for Teddy Wheeler? Hadn't done very good. Okay, how's that done for the Summer of Love mayor in Seattle? They hadn't done very good. And Billy D. de Blasio, maybe the most hated guy in New York State. You know, this guy is just a piece of work. But now you got lovely Warren. And you got to come to one simple conclusion, okay, is that these mayors, and I've said this over and over and over, I call them rubber chicken mayors. Now, if you've ever been to a rubber chicken dinner, that's what they do. They go give speeches, they cut the chicken, and it's rubber, and, you know, you eat that with the beans on the side, you have a couple drinks, listen to a boring speech, and you go home, okay? And normally the mayors are giving the boring speech, you know. They're trying to get reelected or they're at some function. You know, these mayors are not ready to handle what they're handling now with the upheaval that's going on. But here's my problem, okay? I'm an independent. Watch 22 shows and you'll figure it out. I'm an independent. I sit right here. But every time I turn around, it's another Democratic, liberal mayor. Lovely Warren, okay? This police chief and his team have said that's it. You're not going to support what we're doing. We didn't do anything wrong. You can have the DA, they can check this out until the cows come home. I watched the tape. I feel terrible that this mentally ill man was killed. Not killed, but he died. I feel terrible about that. But now you're going to tear up the whole city of Rochester? Christ, don't you have enough problems up there? Because I'll tell you what, between Buffalo, Syracuse, Rochester, and Albany, wait till this coronavirus is done, okay? The economies are going to be so wrecked by this Andrew Cuomo birdwatcher society, you know, looking out his window with binoculars instead of, you know, handling what the hell he's got to handle as the governor of the state, and then he wants to blame everybody else, okay? This Rochester thing bothers me because it hits a little bit close to home. It's a small town up in upstate New York. I grew up in a small town in upstate New York, and here you have it, you know? Is this what our country's come to? You look at Ron Singletary. This guy is an unbelievable guy. Every indication, every account, all the guy tried to do was his job for a long time. And he's an African American. But Lovely, you know, she wants to criticize you because you know what they're doing? They get the playbook from the Democratic Party, and that bothers me. And I'm going to tell you something else. Now, everybody who's watching the show, if you're a new viewer, you're going to think that I'm like a Republican. I'm not. But I got bad news on Biden, too. That's coming up. So this is not a good show for the Democrats on the To Be Frank show. Not doing it intentionally. The news will take this show where we need to go. But Rochester, New York, and having Ron Singletary and his deputy and another guy step down because they feel like their integrity is at stake, that's really sad. That's just really sad. And then you got, okay, Teddy Wheeler. Teddy, okay? Lovely Warren, Teddy Wheeler, Summer of Love, all under the direction of Billy D. de Blasio. You got Teddy Wheeler, the mayor, okay, of Portland. This guy has created one of the biggest messes in the history of any city in the United States. If you want to be the mayor, because I'm going to get into this, he's running in a runoff against a woman that's equally as nuts as him. All right, we're going to cover her in a minute. I'll give you her name and some of the crazy stuff she's talking about. If your life's mission is to become mayor, pack up your bags, sell the house, drive or fly to Portland, get residency. If you have an IQ over 70, you got a 95% chance that you could be mayor up there. I think I could win if I told them, hey, put me on the ballot and I'm just going to sit here in Dallas. I'll run everything from right here. I mean, this is insane. Now, you ready for this? Teddy Wheeler. There's been well over 100 days of rioting. He's the guy that went out and tried to make peace with all these nut jobs. Again, I got to cover this every show. These are not protesters. Started out with African Americans protesting the unlawful death of George Floyd. So let's hit that again. The unlawful death of George Floyd. It all started out. Now all of a sudden you got anarchists and you got Antifa and you got all these crazies up there that all they want is attention. They hate the country. And Teddy's trying to put his arm around them. Well, they go to his house now. They want him to quit and everything else. So how's that working out for you, Ted? But here's a statistic that's really, really sad, is that his approval rating. Now, he hates the Donald, okay? Yeah, the Donald. The Donald's approval rating is like 47, 48, whatever the hell it is. Teddy Wheeler's approval rating in Portland, 26%. 26%. Like I said, if you want to be mayor to a mid-sized city, just move there. If your IQ's over 70, you got a shot. I'm telling you right now. Vegas has got it 8-5 pick'em. You got a shot. All right. So there's Teddy Wheeler, the worst mayor other than de Blasio, tied with, Lovely and everybody else, is in a runoff election in November. November 3rd, he's in a runoff election with Sarah Anarone. I want to say this name right because, when it comes to these names, I don't have like 27 people. I'm going to spell it for you. Iannarone. All right? She's as nutty as Teddy Wheeler. I mean, you got to hear some of the stuff. Her quote, this will sum it up. This is all you got to know about what's going on in Portland. Her quote is peaceful protests might not be moving the conversation forward. Peaceful protests may not be moving the conversation forward. In other words, go out there and wreck the hell out of the city because that might move the conversation forward. It must be in the water up there. These people are nuts. I mean, I've been to Portland in my NBA days. I was up there another time to play golf. I mean, what are they doing up there? I've never even heard of something like this. Now there's a runoff between Teddy Wheeler and Sarah, whatever the hell her last name is, okay? This is just insane. If you live in Portland, you need to pack your car up and get the hell out of there. Unless you want to run for mayor. If you're going to run for mayor, then, you might have a shot. Over 70 IQ, and, I laid it out for you. This is nuts. So we're going to really keep an eye on this one. I wish Vegas would put a lineup on this. This would even be one I might look at. But man, oh man, oh man. Okay, let's go to the monologue. Segment 1 is about the confusion and frustration that is hampering the push to reopen our schools. Now, anybody that thinks that these schools are just opened up and everything's great, it's not. All you got to do is read the newspaper, get on the internet, watch TV, however the hell you get your news. There's a lot of stuff going on here. I feel so bad for the teachers and I feel so bad for the kids because it seems to me that the organization is really not done the way maybe it should be. Let's roll the tape and then I'll give you some editorial on this.
For some, starting the school year remotely has been anything but smooth.
I went to the website, tried to log into the eClass portal, and was getting an error message for the most part.
The first day of virtual school in Gwinnett County, Georgia began on Wednesday with many students unable to get online.
For only half the kids to be logged on is a problem.
The district asked students to stagger their logins in the hopes of solving the problem. While in Humble, Texas, the superintendent said a cyber attack on their district server kept some students from accessing their first day of classes on Tuesday. And Thursday, Atlanta's mayor also had technical issues, tweeting, "It's noon and I still haven't been able to get the twins logged in." Equal access to technology is one reason the Glendale Unified School District in California is offering its elementary-age students to do their distance learning from inside their own school buildings under the supervision of substitute teachers.
This is an opportunity for us to close our digital divide. We would have never ordered so many devices so quickly and done incredible amount of thorough professional development to really allow our educators to successfully deliver instruction in distance learning.
The decision between in-person and virtual learning still a contentious issue across the country. After initially deciding to start with a 4-week period of distance learning, Hillsborough County Public Schools in Florida backtracked and will now offer the choice of in-person learning just 1 week after they start the school year on August 24th.
We will have to return to school.
The change comes after a warning from the state's Department of Education that funds could be withheld from the district if in-person learning isn't offered. And a Wisconsin school district's decision to open their buildings 5 days a week with a mask mandate for students who choose to come to school still didn't satisfy everyone.
6-foot distance and masks are a pagan ritual of satanic worshipers.
Meanwhile, the plan to hold in-person classes in the Phoenix suburb of Queen Creek has led to some teacher resignations.
It's like I'm letting them down, but what am I going to do? Do I pick the 150 kids? Where do I pick my kids?
So there you have it. I mean, it's we've called it on this show. We've talked about multiple things. We've talked about that the reopening of these schools will not be easy, and we really got into the whole distance learning problem, that the technology doesn't really fit what the teachers are trying to do, and then what the students, number one, and the parents, number two, are able to understand about how to put this all together. And I've talked to, as I mentioned on prior show, I've talked to 4 teachers in 4 different states, okay? And all 4 confirmed that the planning over the summer was nowhere near what it needed to be to get ready to be able to handle this. So Ron DeSantis, okay, Mr. DeSantis on the, Navy SEAL thing, okay, teachers and students aren't Navy SEALs, so it's a bad analogy. But the students and the teachers, the teachers themselves really on the distance learning, they're trying to figure it out. Well, the 4 teachers in 4 different states that I talked to all said that the distance learning issue is really going to be a problem because there's no uniform package. And 3 of the 4 said, look, we're not even going to send our kids to school. We have to go because of our job in the teachers union. We have to go, but we're not going to send our kids. 3 of the 4 aren't even sending their kids to school right now. They're just keeping them at home, and whatever distance learning that they can get, they're going to get. But this is another situation where the school districts themselves are just not prepared to be able to, handle this. And it's sad because, I can imagine how frustrating it is, especially if you have younger kids. You got 3rd or 4th graders, and then you're sitting there and you're trying to figure out technology that, quite frankly, you don't really understand, okay? I mean, how frustrating could that be? You got to be pulling your hair out. So that's the issue. Now, in Providence, Rhode Island, the teachers union is protesting the reopening plans. Now, this is a different spin that I'm going to give you. This is really an interesting piece of the story. The union says that they are concerned about returning to school which is going to be, I believe now, next week, in buildings that they say have been unsafe and unclean since long before the pandemic. So now that's the first that, at least I've heard, that there are now other mitigating issues that the teachers are now dealing with, that they really haven't fixed the old problems. And now we got the new problems with the pandemic. I mean, how much of this is going on in the schools? You know, how much of this is out there? So the Providence Teachers Union is now really gonna, buckle down and say, listen, unless you fix some of these things. And again, we get back to the discussions that I had with 4 different teachers in 4 different states. They all agreed that the planning in the summer was nowhere near what it needed to be in order to get the schools and the curriculum ready for what we're having to deal with the pandemic. So, we're going to stay on the school thing. We've been on it since I really started the show. But this is something that is really concerning. When Ron DeSantis and even President Trump, I gotta get on to Donald here a little bit. When they start talking about we're going to pull your funding if you don't open, I'd say pull the funding all you want. We need a game plan to open up. So don't force this down our throats. I mean, that doesn't really help anybody. So we're going to keep an eye on this whole school thing. I just thought it was worth mentioning that outside of even the pandemic issues, at least in Providence, and I guarantee you that's not the only place, there's other mitigating issues that the teachers are dealing with, trying to figure all this out. Okay, the second segment, I can't let this go anymore. Now, I'm going to get some bad mail here about the Democratic-leaning side of my audience, which everybody knows. I am right in the middle. I hope you know that. I don't take sides, not taking sides. That's a unique part of the show, and it's the reason I do the show. But we got to talk about Joey Biden. We really got to talk about him. And then we're going to talk about the Donald, but we got to talk about Joey Biden. I mean, there's a lot of issues with Mr. Biden, Vice President Biden, okay? There really is. I mean, he's starting now to flip-flop on everything. And I got a couple of specific examples. But can I tell you what I think this election is coming down to? This is what I'm feeling, is that you're not going to vote for somebody, you're going to vote against somebody. I think that's what's happening in the election cycle now. Now, the Donald, as it relates to the polls, and we're going to cover the situation with the Donald that I really gave a very passionate monologue on, I think, last show, about this whole situation with the military and the things that he supposedly said. We're going to cover that. And I said point blank, go back and look. I said point blank, if he's guilty of that, he should resign. But at the same time, if the Democrats jump on this like Joe Biden did, and they're wrong, they should walk off stage left. Because when you're now trying to pin something more on the Donald than what he already creates for himself, which is a bushel basket full, okay, of stuff, you got to really think about it. But I want to talk about Biden because you got a story that's out there that I thought was interesting. See, if you're in this deal like I am now to do this show twice a week, you got to disregard about 90% of the stories. I really handpick these things because what I'm trying to do is get something that's meaningful that people can kind of relate to, okay? Now, anybody who watches Joe Biden can see that he's not the same guy he was 5 years ago. He's not the same guy he was 10 years ago. Now, you know what? Age does that to you, right? I'm not there yet, but, I think if we all live long enough, if God gives us long life, everybody's going to be dealing with this. The problem is he's running for president of the United States. He doesn't hold press conferences as a regular rule. all the questions that he gets asked are planted questions as I see them. And I've got a list of questions that if I got into a press, now the To Be Frank show wants to go to the next press conference. Somebody see if they can get us the credentials, and I'll go up there, okay? And I'll ask whatever questions. I'm going to go through a list of questions that I would ask Joe Biden. And again, I've not made up my mind who I'm voting for or voting against. But Joe Biden is getting a real pass in the media. If you don't say that on a news show, you know what? Then you're not paying attention. You're just not. I mean, he's getting a pass beyond belief. Well, a former White House stenographer, Mike McCormick, who worked in the White House for 15 years, and he worked with Biden from 2011 to 2017, wrote a book, Joe Biden Unauthorized. Okay? Inside of that situation, he has made statements that Joe Biden is so far from where he was when he was working with Joe Biden. The Joe Biden of today really has some issues that he's having to deal with that this stenographer who worked with him for 6 years in the White House said that he never saw. This condition, whatever it is with Joe Biden, okay, is getting, a lot worse. And he is pointing out, now, is that a political deal? I don't know, Mr. McCormick, okay? But I think the eye test tells everyone who's watching, and again, if you're going to vote for Joe Biden, vote for him. I would suggest to you that a lot of your vote for the Vice President, Joe Biden, is going to be a vote against the Donald. I mean, this is the way that this is washing out. People are going to vote against somebody more than they're going to vote for somebody in this election. I really believe that. And we'll see, if that's right or wrong. But roll the tape. Let's roll the tape. I want to watch this tape.
For 6 years, my next guest, Mike McCormick, was at Joe Biden's side as his stenographer, transcribing the former VP's every word. McCormick was present anytime the former VP gave speeches, met with foreign leaders, had off-the-record chats with reporters, you name it. Now, in other words, he would have been a near constant presence during Biden's time in the White House. Now, given that personal relationship, it's all the more stunning to read what he wrote about Biden in his new book. He's lost a step, and he doesn't seem to have the same mental acuity as he did 4 years ago. He doesn't have the energy. He doesn't have the pace of his speaking. He's a different guy. It's hard to quibble with the evidence.
What holds this nation together, and always has been an intuitive and expressed commitment to the Constitution, to our institutions. All men and women created by go. You know the thing.
The rapidly rising I don't know.
Joining me exclusively is Mike McCormick, Biden's former stenographer and author of Joe Biden Unauthorized. All right, Mike, what troubles you about where Biden is now versus where he was just 4 years ago? In that clip that we played from 2017, I believe, he does seem, just to the the casual observer, quite a bit different.
Hi, Laura. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, and the title of my book is Joe Biden Unauthorized and the 2020 Crack-Up of the Democratic Party. And I'll get to that second part of the title later. Joe Biden is a different guy than he was. He doesn't have the same vitality. I listened to every word Joe Biden spoke. I worked as a stenographer in the White House for 15 years. I started in the Bush administration in 2002. I worked for the Obama administration, and then I worked 1 year for President Trump. So I'm not a political appointee. I have sort of a across-the-board perspective. And because of that, I'm kind of like a neutral observer. And that's why I wrote the book, is because I saw and understood as Joe Biden was running for president, there was a lot of things I saw that America needs to know. What I didn't know when I was writing the book was how far he'd slipped until I'd seen how he's become this year. His performance in the debates was pretty low quality. And when I saw him do his speech at the Democratic National Convention, that wasn't the Joe Biden I knew. That guy was reading from a teleprompter, almost, it was verbatim. And he's never done that. It was a 25-minute speech. The 25-minute speech would just get him warmed up in the past when I worked for him.
All right, I want to...
Now, let me put a qualifier on all that. I had to really think about playing that, but it was the best tape that I could come up with on the subject. Laura Ingraham is an absolute Fox ideologue that can't stand the Democratic Party. That's her show. So let me put that qualifier on. She's not one of my favorite reporters. Mr. McCormick, I don't know about this guy's motivations, okay? I don't know. I only know about the eye test. And everything that he said is things that we're all thinking about. Is Joe Biden really all there? And I know for people that are out there that just can't stand the Donald, I'm not one of those. I'm in the middle. I haven't decided what I'm doing. But for people that can't stand the Donald, you could run Saddam Hussein. And you know what? They'd vote for him because they got to get Donald Trump the hell out of there. It's their mission in life. It's sadly what's happened to our country. And for the Democrats, unfortunately, to come up with a 76, 77-year-old guy at the time that really looks to me like he's lost it, that's just not great for our country. It just isn't great for our country. And so, you know, you have to look at it. Now, there are a whole list of flip-flops. I'm just going to cover a couple of them because the mainstream news network, they won't cover this. They won't even ask questions about this. Fracking. Does everyone know what fracking is? It's when you go down into the ground and you kind of explode this thing and it shakes up the oil and the gas that's down there, and then it comes up the pipe and the whole deal. Well, Joe Biden and his running mate, Kamala Harris, have been very, very clear for years that their policy position when it comes to energy and the environment is they want to end fracking. Okay? Now, that's their position. You know, I live in the middle of Texas. I mean, I know what's going on here with oil and gas and everything else. So forget about whatever position I might take on it. They want to end it. Well, now somebody went to him and said, well, it's a bad idea in Pennsylvania and a few other places if you want to be president. So what does he do? He now says, well, I don't want to end fracking. I was misinterpreted. I just don't want it on federal lands. I don't want it on federal lands. Guess what? The drilling on federal lands is less than 10% of any of the fracking or drilling or anything else. That's one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard. But what I'm saying to you is, you got to stand for something. If you really don't think this is good for our environment, you don't think it's good for our country, you've said it for 3 years, stand behind it. That's all I'm trying to say. This guy's like a waffle. Now, again, the Donald's got his own problems. We're gonna talk about him in a minute. But, I mean, this guy's got to stand. You got to stand for something. Joe also endorsed AOC's crazy plan, the Green New Deal. He endorsed it. Has anybody read it? I actually took a little bit of time between shows and I read, not all of it, but I read a lot of it. I mean, it's insane. By 2050, no cars, no airplanes. All the buildings now are going to have to be completely redone. I mean, this is like not even like $1 trillion. It's $1 gazillion. Like there's not even that much money on the planet. Okay? And then the whole cows. And I mean, what the hell? I mean, if you're going to now have AOC as one of your people, all right? First of all, you got to have brain damage to do that. And, you know, AOC's AOC, okay? You know, there's a reason that I don't think much of her, because she cost 25,000 people in New York a chance to get a job with Amazon, and she had no standing behind what she was doing. I spent the vast majority of my life in economic development and creating jobs. And you know what? I know how important it is to these people. You want to know something about the average guy? he can't create his own job. Let me say that again. The average guy can't create his own job. Depends on companies and the government and people to do the right thing. Well, she didn't do the right thing. She was grandstanding. She doesn't know anything from anything, okay? Oh, she's popular, and she's popular on YouTube and Facebook. And all right, that's great. But we're not running a popularity contest. We're trying to run a country. So, Joe, you back these things. You need to answer for those. Here's a quote. It's a quote from Joey Biden. No more drilling on federal lands. No more drilling, including offshore, and no ability for the oil industry to continue to drill, period. This is what he said. I'm reading this right out of a text. Taking millions of cars off the road. He said this. No new fracking. Well, now it's like, well, I really didn't mean that. No one went through this with me in Pennsylvania, all the problems that this is going to be created. Look, Joe, I want to think about, backing you. I mean, I don't think you're a bad guy. You gave 47 years of your life to your country. But, have a little backbone and stand for what you believe in. We don't even know what the hell you believe in. I don't know how somebody's going to be able to vote for you. They can vote your name because they're voting against the Donald. But I'm trying to figure out, how do you vote for you? Okay? Now, here's an interesting thing. Okay? Here are some questions. I got a little help on this, okay? So I can't take all this credit. I'm not going to tell you where, from whom, whatever. But I got a little help on this. If we can get the 2B Frank show to go to the next Joe Biden press conference, I'd ask 4 questions. I got 40, but I'd ask 4. You ready? So here they come. Once you promised to put Beto O'Rourke, do we remember him? Beto O'Rourke. All right, he's from El Paso, Texas. In charge of gun control efforts, he said, quote, hell yes, we're going to take your guns. Hell yes, we're going to take your guns. Is this still your plan, Joe? Is Beto O'Rourke, what you said publicly, is he going to be taking everybody's guns? Yes or no? If he is, he is. 2, during the Dem primaries, you supported a carbon tax and renewable mandates, okay? Every tax policy center, all being the liberal ones, because that's all there are, says that in order to do that, you'd have to raise taxes on the middle class and small business. You have to raise taxes. In order to do what you just said, you have to raise taxes on the middle class and small business. How can you now say that you won't raise taxes on anyone making less than $400,000? These are contradictory statements. Again, did somebody come to you and say, well, we need to make this statement because, this is going to sound good and, we're in a big fight here with Trump? Joe, you said one thing, you're saying another one now. I want to know which one it is. So, be the second question. 3, you've embraced the AOC, New Green Deal, which bans cars and air travel as the framework for your energy and environmental policy. Is that still your position, Joe? Is that still your position? Because if it is, as a voter, we want to know, what are you standing for now? Okay? And then the 4th. You promised to return the Obama administration directive on Title IX, which has denied, and it has denied due process to college students accused of sexual misconduct, preventing them from questioning their accuser. Okay? You want to return to the Obama administration's policy. You said that. Why don't college students, Mr. Biden, deserve the same presumption of innocence that you enjoyed after Tara Reade accused you of assaulting her? Don't they deserve the same presumption of innocence? So these are some of the questions that if this thing was being run properly in the news media, that you'd have people trying to answer. And then you got his whole family issues with his son, his brothers, and all that, okay? You know, Joe, I want to hear from you. We want to know, what do you stand for? You know, don't just go on TV and say Trump's nuts and here's the deal and he's lying about the vaccine. Okay, you know, all that's good. But what are you actually going to do? You know, whenever anybody asks me, well, oh, I filed this report that's on the internet. Joe, do you even write the report? Do you even know what the hell it says? Hold a press conference for 2 hours and answer some of these questions. That's what people want to know. But I'll say this for the last thing on this segment. Then we have one more segment. This is a vote against somebody, not a vote for somebody. This is what this election is coming out to be. Okay, the third and last segment is about the Atlantic magazine story on Trump. Okay, I went off on this last show. And the reason I went off on it is, and I said it, pull it up, whatever you want to do, I stand behind everything I said. If Donald actually said and did this, he should resign. Get out of the White House. Matter of fact, send the National Guard, get him out. Okay? Get him out. Shouldn't be in the White House if he said that. Shouldn't be president. I said equally on the other side, though. If it comes out that he didn't say these things, and the Democrats now are trying to use this like they did with the Russia hoax and some of this other stuff. Now, again, the Donald's created his own problems. The stuff he said on Ukraine was ridiculous. Now, was that worth getting impeached for? No. But, I mean, you know, that was not very smart. And he said a lot of other not very smart things. Our Pentagon, all they want to do is get in wars because they're got a lot of government contractors on it. Don't say that, Donald. Don't say that less than 2 months before an election. I mean, that's ridiculous. Don't say it, okay? Don't say the things that you've said about John McCain. Just keep them to yourself. But this Atlantic story, okay, this was bothersome. But let me tell you what's happening now. You got people coming out and saying they were in the room. In the room. And the Donald didn't say that, okay? Roll the tape.
Former National Security Advisor John Bolton joins me now. He is the author of The Room Where It Happened. Good to have you with us this evening, Mr. Bolton. What's your reaction to what the president had to say about this whole incident?
Well, in fact, he was responding to an article in the Atlantic magazine from last Thursday night. And the article itself is a mashup of all kinds of allegations, what he thinks of John McCain, which I thought was largely accurate, and what he happened to say in Paris on the day before Armistice Day, the 100th anniversary of Armistice Day, getting ready to go visit French President Macron. And according to what that article said, the president made disparaging remarks about our soldiers, the people buried at the En Marne cemetery, in connection with the decision for him not to go to the ceremony that was planned that afternoon. And that was simply false. I don't know who told the author that, but that was false. And I recounted that in my book, The Room Where It Happened, and reaffirmed that in response to questions the next day.
Yeah, I mean, you've heard the back and forth between reporters on this. Jennifer Griffin came on today and said that she stands by her sources. She says that you were not, quote, in the room where it happened when this was discussed. What do you say to that?
Well, she's just flatly wrong. Look, I can tell you exactly what it was. We were in the ambassador's residence in Paris. We were supposed to be having a 10:30 meeting to brief the president for his meeting with French President Emmanuel Macron at 11. The president was late, which is frequently the case. I don't think the entire affair lasted more than 10 or 15 minutes. And the main issue was whether or not weather conditions permitted the president to go out to the En Marne cemetery. The people I recall being there were John Kelly, one of his aides, Mike Pompeo, myself, Jamie McCord, our ambassador to France. We had this discussion. It was mostly John Kelly presenting the logistical reasons why the trip couldn't take place. And the president assented to the recommendation that he not go. He didn't protest that he really needed to go. He just sort of took the facts as they were. It's a very straight weather call. After that meeting, just for what it's worth, we then went to the Élysée Palace for the president to meet with Macron. That lasted until about 12:45. The two presidents were then joined by the two first ladies for a lunch, just the four of them, that lasted into the afternoon. The president then went back to the embassy and a dinner that night for the heads of state who were attending. And that was his schedule that day.
All right, so I had nothing better to do for a couple days about 3 weeks ago. So what I do, I picked up, actually my youngest son bought me John Bolton's book. That is a scathing report on Donald Trump. I was in the room when, or whatever the hell the name of it is. This is no friend of Donald Trump's, okay? This is no friend of Donald Trump's. But the reason this is important to me is that here's a guy that was in the room that's willing to go on the record and say what happened. Jennifer Griffin, you know, I was kind of a Jennifer Griffin fan. I thought she just gave the news, but she's really going out there. Listen, Jennifer, here's the deal. The American people don't want to hear a lot of BS. Tell your source, either go on the record or you need to shut the hell up and quit writing. Because we're in the middle of the most important election maybe in our country's history. And if Donald did this, Americans want to know. If he didn't do it, we also want to know. And the fact of the matter is that as you look at this thing, this is reporting at its worst. Oh, well, we use unnamed sources all the time. Well, not in this case. Okay? Now, there's also John Kelly's chief of staff, and his name is Zach Fuentes. Okay? He's come out and also said, I'm in the room. Donald didn't say these things. All right? So all of this reporting done by the Atlantic, and now Jennifer Griffin, who's put herself in a terrible position, okay, for Fox News, at some level now, if you can't put people on the record, because now two people that are in the room came on the record and said he didn't say that, okay? Now, what has he said? He said stuff about John McCain, completely stupid stuff. I'm not defending the Donald. I'm trying to defend this election. I'm trying to defend right from wrong. And you know what? This isn't right that all this hearsay now, and people are coming up with this. The Atlantic is a left-leaning magazine, period, end of conversation. Now, Fox News is not. So, Jennifer, Miss Griffin, get your source, put him on TV. We'll put him on this show. Whoever your source is. I mean, at some level now, your integrity is at risk. And I don't care really what Brit Hume or Martha McCallum or anyone else says. This is too important of an issue. If people want to go on the record and say, I was in the room at this moment, at this time, and this is what Donald said, then I think the world wants to hear it. Short of that, multiple people have come to Donald's defense now and basically said he didn't say that. So, you know, we got to quit swinging elections on these reports. And this is the kind of thing that makes somebody sitting on the fence. I said it. If it's true, I'm not voting for Donald. And he should get out of there. Okay, you should never say that about our fallen heroes. But I'll tell you, the facts aren't there that he said it. And I don't care how many unnamed sources you want to use. Atlantic Magazine or Jennifer Griffin. I don't care how many you come up with. They're not good in this particular situation. So you know what? Just get on to another story or get your unnamed sources and put them on TV. It's A or B. All right. That's our show today. It's great to be with you. Remember, again, you can get our show at the 2B Frank Show YouTube, the 2B Frank Show Twitter, the 2B Frank Show LinkedIn, the 2B Frank Show Facebook, and the 2bfrankshow.com. If you haven't watched all the episodes, they're all there. Watch them over the weekend when you got nothing else to do. And we'll be back with you on Monday. Everybody have a very, very safe weekend. And be careful, wear your masks, and don't let anybody breathe or cough on you. This is Frank Zaccanelli signing off. Have a good day.